Professor Krishnan, Director, IIM Bangalore, Dr. Brajesh Pandey, Executive Director with the Indian National Science Academy, Mr. Alok Nanda from GE Aerospace, Mr. Prasanta from Ceros, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening. It's a real pleasure for me to extend a very warm welcome to this session, R&D as a catalyst for India's growth and competitiveness. As India charts its course towards being a developed, resilient, and inclusive economy by 2047, we all agree that R&D must become the fulcrum of this transformation. But to sustain a high growth trajectory and to evolve into a $30 trillion economy, there is need for urgent and substantial increase in our national commitment to R&D. The fact is, today India spends only 0.7% of its GDP on R&D, and this is a figure that lags significantly compared to our global peers. Nations today recognize R&D not just as expenditure, but as a strategic investment in the future capabilities, competitiveness, and self-reliance. And for India to catch up and lead, we must set some bold targets. Bold, yet achievable. And therefore, we need to raise our national R&D spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2030, in the next 5 years. And we must target at least 4% by 2047. A very compelling example of India's R&D potential was during the COVID-19 pandemic. We witnessed extraordinary cooperation and collaboration between government, industry, academia, and the scale, the speed, the quality at which we responded to that crisis took India to a leading position in vaccine development and production, in production of masks, in production of ventilators, and a lot of other medical equipment. That underscores the fact that when mission-driven, when India comes together, our entrepreneurial spirit, coupled with our policy support, we are capable of delivering world-class innovation at scale. Another statistic I wanted to share with you as context. Today, of all of our R&D spend, less than 40% comes from industry. That means more than 60% of R&D spend is today still in the public space, in the government space. This must change. And it's very important that industry takes a leading position in the R&D mix of the country. CII has been the forefront of this transformation. For us, R&D and innovation has been an extremely high priority, and we have been working on promoting the innovation culture through a range of initiatives. We are a partner in the Global Innovation Index, and we support industry on a number of related aspects such as digital transformation, IP centers, design, and other areas. As we begin this session, we are really fortunate today to have with us a very distinguished panel. And I know you hear this in every session, but as I introduce the panelists, you will agree with me. Each one of them brings a very unique perspective on how R&D can become the engine of India's next wave of growth. Gentlemen, I look forward to listening from each one of you. I have the pleasure to introduce Professor Hrishikesh Krishnan, Director of the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. Professor Krishnan was earlier the Director of IIM Indore. He has held the Jamuna Raghavan Chair in Entrepreneurship at IIMB from 2007 to 2010. Sir was educated at IIT Kanpur, Stanford University, and IIM Ahmedabad. He's been listed in the Thinkers 50 India list of one of the most influential management thinkers from India. Please welcome Professor Krishnan. Friends, we are privileged to have Dr. Brajesh Pandey here. Dr. Brajesh Pandey is the Executive Director of the Indian National Science Academy. Dr. Pandey is a material scientist with more than 20 years of experience in teaching and research. He's published over 50 papers in peer-reviewed international journals. He's been awarded the Dr. Vikram Sarabhai National Award for Popularization of Science. He's been a member of a number of expert committees set up by the Government of India. He's co-founded a startup and he's the CEO of another. Please welcome Dr. Brijesh Pandey. Friends, we have Mr. Alok Nanda here. Alok is the CTO of GE Aerospace. He leads GE Aerospace's India Technology Center. He inspires multidisciplinary research and engineering teams to live the GE Aerospace purpose of invent the future of flight, lift people up and bring them home safely. He also collaborates with GE's internal and external partners to maximize the value from the Indian innovation ecosystem. Prior to joining GE, Alok spent 8 years at the Indian Defense Research and Development Organization, DRDO. Alok is also the co-chair of the CII, National Committee on R&D and Innovation. A master's degree in mechanical engineering from IIT Mumbai. Is based out of Bangalore, India. Please welcome Mr. Alok Nanda. And finally, I have the privilege of introducing Mr. Prasanta Borkakoti, Resident Director for Seros. He's a transformative force in the oil and gas industry and is celebrated for his visionary strategies, operational excellence, and commitment to innovation. Prior to his current role, he was the Chief Executive at Oil India Limited, where he led over 18,000 professionals across critical domains, including production, geophysics, infrastructure, and is credited with achieving record gas production in FY 22-23. His leadership has earned national acclaim, including recognition as an exemplary leader by the World HRD Congress. Under his stewardship, Oil India Limited won the Best Institution Building Award at Asia Best Employer Brand Awards in 2022. Please welcome Mr. Prasanta. Let's start the panel discussion now. And I have a list of questions here, but we'll try and make this as interactive as possible. So we'll try and go back and forth a little bit and make this more of a conversation than a one-way monologue. So let me start, as we will always start, with Professor Krishnan. And I think I made a mention of this in my inaugural comments, which was that Indian industry currently contributes only 39% to national R&D spend. So what do you think are the key barriers preventing higher private sector R&D investment, and how do you think they can be overcome? And keeping in mind the Anusandhan National Research Foundation, which aims to reach 1 lakh crore of R&D investments, which also requires commitment from the industrial sector. What do you think needs to be done to enhance the participation of industry in R&D and innovation activities?
Sure, thank you. Good evening. So I think let's just take a short historical detour. If you just go back to the time when India started liberalization, one of the objectives of the liberalization policies was actually to enhance the technological capability of Indian industry. Now, to what extent has that actually panned out over time is the question. What's interesting is if you look at the global scenario in R&D, you will see that certain industries are just inherently more R&D intensive than others. Unfortunately, India's presence in those industries is quite limited. So if you look at semiconductors, you look at advanced electronics, advanced materials, these are the kind of industries where typically you will have companies spending very large amounts on R&D. Just to give you a simple index, China's biggest spender on R&D is Huawei. India's biggest spender on R&D is Tata Motors. Huawei's spend on R&D is about 8 times that of Tata Motors. Now that's not because Huawei is necessarily more R&D intensive. It's just in a sector where if you don't do that level of R&D, you're not in the game at all. Whereas in transportation, maybe the kind of investments required are much lower. So the whole scenario is partly linked to the composition of our GDP, also sectorally. If you look at manufacturing, for example, which is a priority area for us today, manufacturing has not grown to the extent that we all hoped. And once again, it's largely the manufacturing sectors which tend to be much more R&D intensive compared to services sector. So if you ask me for at the high level, why is it that India's R&D spend is lower than many of its competitor countries? The reason is because of the way our our manufacturing and industrial sectors are constituted. India's largest spenders on R&D are actually transportation and pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals, again, while we are a big player globally, we are largely a player in generics. And generics, as many of you would know, is much less R&D intensive than original drug discovery. So it's partly a result of certain choices that our companies have made, certain choices that the industrial sector has made, that our R&D spend is relatively lower. Now, the question is, of course, how do we go forward? And I think part of the question was related to the Anusandhan National Research Foundation. Now, the government has recognized that India needs to get more R&D intensive and across the board. As I mentioned, it's partly linked to our focus on becoming a manufacturing hub for the world, but it's also related to our being present in some of the emerging sectors. So the whole objective of the Anusandhan National Research Foundation and the other initiative which was announced in this year's budget, which is to invest 20,000 crores in creating deep tech ventures, is to ensure that there is a significant investment in the R&D intensive sectors that we need to create in India. The Anusandhan National Research Foundation was originally envisaged as emulating the US's National Science Foundation, creating a much more structured way of creating R&D capabilities in the academic and research sectors. And the 20,000 crore investment, which I just mentioned to you, is more focused on the industrial sector. But the idea is both of these together, investment in academia and investment in industry, and of course the joint working between the two, should help us galvanize much more significant R&D investments in the year to come. I think that, as we all know, the challenge is not really so much with talent, though there are talent challenges as well. Our own talented scientists and engineers, when put in the right environment and set the right challenge, whether it be in space in India or whether it be working for the top companies of the world, have shown they are second to none in doing R&D. It's really whether we can create the right ecosystem, have the presence in the right industries, and of course the right aspirations and leadership. That's the last point I would like to make. Do we have companies which really aspire to be global leaders in tech-intensive sectors? Historically, we have not seen that. Now maybe things are changing with a lot of high aspiration startups coming into the fray. And my own bet is that if India really wants to become an R&D superpower, it will have to be led by a new generation of companies, a new generation of very, very tech-intensive and tech-driven entrepreneurs who create a really strong tech-intensive sector in the years to come.
Thank you, Professor. I think a very interesting sort of dimension I think you've shared, that R&D spend actually follows the sectoral composition of the economy. And if the sectoral composition of the economy is in sectors that do not typically have a lot of R&D spend, why will the R&D spend be comparable to other parts of the world, for example? Very interesting. Now let's go on to some other global examples, some global R&D models such as DARPA, which is for defense research in the US, or Fraunhofer, which have been used to create sustained outcome-driven research ecosystems. How do you think some of those examples can inform the evolution of similar programs in India?
So the good news is we are already beginning to see that, and that's, I think, an important thing for us going forward. What we are seeing is that in sectors where India has strategic priorities, for example, in defense, in space, and so on, we are already seeing that the government has started initiatives to create that kind of critical mass of local firms and projects in academia and research institutions. Just take the defense sector, for example. The government started a program called IDEX. The whole idea of IDEX is to create a whole network of startups and tech companies which can create the capabilities to build the defense equipment which we are currently importing. And the idea is not only to just meet the needs at the current technological frontier, but also to anticipate the needs that will come in future. You can already see that, for example, happening in the area of drones. It's happening in a limited way in, for example, rocket technology. Obviously, there's a long way to go, but the seeds have been sown. And I think the whole idea of IDEX is to say, let the defense forces and let the government identify what are the key requirements, and then let us support, nurture, fund a set of really good tech entrepreneurs who can try and create products that meet those requirements, and not just by giving them money, but also providing them access to the research facilities of the government, giving them access to the customers. So there's a kind of co-development happening. So in a way, if you look at DARPA has a lot of these tech challenges which they throw out. In India, maybe you need something more than the tech challenge, because you also need to work closely with the startups to enable them to build those capabilities, and that's exactly what the government is trying to do. There are other programs as well. There is the Quantum Mission, for example, which is trying to build capabilities across both industry and academia in quantum technologies. There is the Cyber Physical Systems program, which is trying to do a similar thing. And I think the good news is, traditionally we tended to think that it's enough if you just invest in academic research projects. But today there's a clear realization that's certainly not enough. We need to build capabilities across the chain, right through our research, development, engineering, scaling up, commercialization. And we've done that in another sector as well. We have done that in biotechnology, where the BIRAC program, which is now more than 10 years old, has created a very large number of biotech startups, created biotech capabilities, and under BIRAC, the government makes funds available not just to research labs, but also to startups and even to established companies. For example, there's funding available for established companies to commercialize or scale up their innovations in that area. So the understanding that you need to take an ecosystem approach, and you can't just look at individual players in this whole scenario, I think is the important lesson which we have learned over time, and which we are now trying to replicate at a larger scale. And I just mentioned to you in my previous remarks about ANRF and the 20,000 crores which has been earmarked for deep tech. And one of the ideas right now about deep tech is to create a fund of funds, create a lot of funding available so that this amount gets diffused across a much wider range of startups so that we can build capabilities in those areas.
Thank you. And actually a great segue to my next question. Actually, I'll now move on to Alok. Alok, if that's okay. And I'll just pick on the deep tech sort of comment that Professor Krishnan just made. What do you think India can do to take the lead in such sectors? You know, the emerging technology space, aerospace, AI, robotics, chip design, etc. What do you think these R&D intensive sort of sectors of industry require, especially from both from an industry participation standpoint, but also from policy support standpoint?
Yeah, great question. And I think the foundation that Professor Krishnan laid with his answer, I think I'll take from there. But let me give you a context from what I'm going to say so that you don't misinterpret what I'm going to say. The context is that now we are within reach of becoming like one of the big economies in the world. We are amongst the top 5 already, okay? So the excuse that we used to have that, okay, now the reality is that India, the priority is to feed people than to innovate or put money in innovation. That is the excuse we always used to have, and there was reality to it. But we've moved on. We've become like the 5th biggest economy in the world. So that's the context that I'm speaking from. It is, if you think about some of the things that we've achieved, many times when we traveled across the world, I think many of us miss the convenience of UPI. No other country in the world offers that convenience. So when we have put our minds to it, we've also achieved something. So that confidence also we have. Our talent, as Professor Krishnan said, okay, is making waves around the world. the biggest tech company CEOs are like from one of us, right? So that's the context I am speaking from. If we have to go from a 5 trillion economy to a 30 trillion economy, we have to look at innovation, we have to look at this world slightly differently than what we have done in the past. That's my context. Now, the answer to the question, what can we do? I'll take an example to make my point and then share the model that I think we need to adopt. Now, as was shared in the introduction, I worked in DRDO for 8 years. My batchmate is today the director of GTRE. You've heard in social media these days this Fund Kaveri Engine campaign going on. I'm sure you would have heard that. And I do listen to Murthy's speeches because he's my batchmate, his close friend, okay. And recently he was talking about Kaveri Engine and he said that, okay, the total amount of money Government of India has spent on Kaveri Engine, total amount is $250 million. Okay. Now, in a context, we can say, oh, so much money we've spent and we've like not really flown that engine in its intended form. But you know, if you think about GE Aerospace, we also are in the same business of making aircraft engines. Our annual R&D budget doesn't end with an M, it ends with a B. Okay, it's in excess of $1 billion annually, okay. So the point is that sometimes we are too harsh on ourselves. And when we say that, okay, US has, or some economies have created aircraft engines and India has not created an aircraft engine, the fact is that it is called that, okay, GE has an aircraft engine, but over decades, this model of the government, GE as a private company, as an industry and academia have worked together to create a slew of technologies which then result in an aircraft engine. It's not like that, okay, private industry invested in something and created it. Like, I'll give you one example. Some of the noise reduction technology in our blades. Okay, we've been working with NASA for last 20-25 years on that, and now it's in our engines, and our engines are quieter than most engines. So what I'm trying to say is that when we say that private industry must invest in innovation, I agree to that. But the point is that initially, to kickstart the technology, especially in low TRL levels, all around the world, the government, the industry and the academia work together to get into a shape that then can become a world-beating products. If we have to become world leaders, we must become world beaters. Okay, we can't be world leaders with only services industry. Services industry got us to where we are, but our journey now in future can't be limited to staying in the service industry. We have to create world beater products, and this hesitation that we have of not trusting the private industry with, I would say, middle class tax rupees, we have to take away. Like we say that 60% of the money in R&D is coming from government. Whose money is it? That is also taxpayers' money. So if that taxpayers of money, why do we hesitate to share that money with an industry that can actually commercialize and industrialize products? So my solution to this is very simple. My solution, and government has already started that. I was very happy to say that government has announced that, okay, 25% of the money that they will give to DRDO must engage private sector to deploy that money. I think that ratio must reverse, because only private industry has the scale and the appetite and the ambition to make money and hence create products which will make money. Making money should not be a problem. Making money should be celebrated. Despite us becoming the 5th largest or 4th largest economy now, like recently we crossed that hurdle, right? only 2 companies of India in the top 100 companies in the world. Now, if we really want to get to the 30 trillion economy, we can't have that continue. We must celebrate companies making money, and if we don't have this troika of industry, government and academia enabling us to commercialize world-beating products, I don't think we can go there. So a little bit longer answer, but hopefully that's what is my experience.
No, thank you for sharing that, and a very, again, a very, very interesting perspective. Are we being too harsh on ourselves? But maybe we need to, and specifically in certain sectors. Would you agree that traditional manufacturing, traditional oil and gas, traditional industrial space needs some kind of a R&D boost?
Absolutely. Without an industrial economy. Now, these days when we talk of tech, what do we talk of? We talk of AI, machine learning, which is tech, which is good. But you know, if we don't have those industrial world-beating products, the amount of growth we can have with the AI soft type of tech would also be very limited. Okay, so I think we must have a boost. We must have missions. I mean, Professor Krishnan talked about a little bit about how DARPA functions. Now, when DARPA announces a challenge, anybody can compete on it. Okay. Now, what happens when somebody wins that challenge? Suppose a private industry wins the challenge, their idea along with some academic institution is the best idea. So DARPA funds them. What do you think is the objective or the intent of DARPA when it comes to IP? Who owns the IP? I mean, now it's a public sector money. It's people's taxpayers' money. Who owns the IP? Who should own the IP? Anyone has a understanding of that? Who owns the IP? Who should own the IP? Those are two different questions. Who should own the IP? So the point is that DARPA is funding. That means taxpayers are paying the money. But DARPA doesn't want to own the IP. Why? Why does DARPA doesn't want to own the? Why does DARPA is very happy to give the IP to the private industry? Why do you think that happens? Because the aim is not to make money. The aim is to develop the economy. The aim is to have that product. And you know the incentive the company has in investing their time and effort is because they want to make money. So making money should not become an inhibition. Somewhere in our mind we inhibit ourselves. We sort of have this campaign about Ambani, Adani as if making money is a crime. We must incentivize making money. That's the only time industry will have incentive to pay, to reinvest in R&D, and I think that's the only way. In my mind, I don't find any other reason. We have a very good ecosystem now. We have a fantastic startup ecosystem. We have a fantastic digital economy. We have a fantastic talent, but somehow we feel making money is a bad thing, and I think that's a big problem in our psyche.
Thank you, Alok. Let me just go across, and I'm going off script here, but Prasanta, I think, would you want to add the oil and gas as a core economy sector? And reflecting on what you just heard from Alok, how do you think, are there any reforms required to boost core R&D spend in sectors like industrials and oil and gas?
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I think last 2 decades have witnessed unprecedented changes in the history of human development. Primarily, if you look at the last 5-6 years, it's the AI and ML-led research works that have gone into various institutions have brought in remarkable changes. Now, when I talk about oil and gas, I think this brings back to the roots of Assam, on the steamy jungles of Digboy, when oil was first discovered. It has been a very long journey from then. As a matter of fact, the company which I work for is a Saros Energy, which is at par with the global companies like Schlumberger, Becker, in providing world-class services. At the moment, we not only work in India, but also in the areas like Gulf of Mexico. We're working in Saudi Arabia and kind of countries like that. So the basic purpose of trying to put across my views on this is, there has been a huge potential of exploration and production of crude oil and natural gas in India, but it needs to be properly fueled from fiscal incentives of the government, which the government is rightly doing so at the moment. There has been a level playing field now for Indian homegrown companies to compete with the global-based companies. And as a matter of fact, today, as I speak to you, I think we are the first company, the company which I represent here, to work extensively in that geothermal energy front in the Puga Valley in Ladakh. So hopefully, I think before this year's winter fog descends, we should be in a position to put those geothermal energy into the pipeline. So the entire oil and gas segment has huge scope for development, but of course it needs to be fueled by the proper accurate research. The kind of data that are available by the Directorate General of Hydrocarbons has been remarkable. And I think in the next years to come or in the decades to come, I think we'll see a lot of oil exploration works. And I think you're all aware that the Konkan Valley, especially the Andaman areas, have also been taken up for exploration. The coastal regulatory zones, which was in place, now has been evacuated by the government. So there has been aggressive exploration strategy on, and I hope in times to come, I think this is one sector that which you can truly bait upon in growth, because energy is one of the key requirements of the country at the moment, where indigenously we produce close to about 30% of the oil and gas. For the balance, we need to depend on the import bills. The imports have been going up absolutely in a huge manner. So I think the more indigenous discovery would come in, would make way to stabilize the economy at that level. Now, thank you so much. I think this is all in brief that I had to say. Thank you.
No, thank you. Let me just follow up with a very quick one. And this is on the role of frugal innovation. And I think this one thing that we all are very familiar with in India is frugal anything. But I think some of the great examples that we've had of frugal innovation in the tech space, what learnings are there for your sector? And how do you think that can become more a part of your core strategy?
I think you must be aware of the fact that I think ONGC has taken a missionary project, for instance, for finding out the real presence of the oil and gas in the country. See, out of the 26 sedimentary basins that we have in the country, today, as on date, only 10 have been discovered. There are still huge opportunities, but people are really little reluctant to go and address these issues for the cost part of it. It turns out to be prohibitively expensive. But as I say, I think with the kind of fiscal incentives that the government is trying to, or is also trying to push through, I think things would definitely show up in the future. And we hope, I think, as a collaborative effort, I think the industry, the academia, the business houses need to really join hands to integrate the learning process and to take this forward. Thank you.
I think you just touched upon the convergence between all the stakeholders in the research and the innovation sort of ecosystem. One of the key sort of opportunities that is there is how do you take public R&D into private application? So R&D coming from state-funded research labs, etc., becoming more and more a source of product development and commercial applications by the private sector.
I think the private sector per se today is open to new ideas. As a matter of fact, I think they've also been supporting the startup concepts, startup companies to a very large extent. The biggest irony that I see today, take for instance the colleges, the research institutions that we have, today it's no more just enough to produce graduates and carry out some research works, fundamental research works. The need is to really scan the scientific horizon, anticipate the changes that would engulf the society and be prepared to work in that direction. I think I'm sure the professor would agree. He has fantastically touched upon this point of making the entire education system getting more towards the industrial application side. Like when we have a problem, we come across a situation, we normally approach an academic institution to do a research, be it on reservoir simulation studies or be it on any other studies for that matter. So what we often find, the kind of knowledge which are being imparted with at the moment, I think has been limited mostly to the textbook knowledge. So what is really important is to get into every segment of the business, getting more, I think that's where we really need to collaborate in a big way. And I think the time is not very far off where possibly the industries and the institutions, the research schools, the research institutions would have to closely collaborate to further the growth of this economy of this country for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think another great segue into my question to Dr. Pandey now. Dr. Pandey, how do you see India's engineering talent and its evolution specifically in response to all you that just heard about the need for increased investment and innovation and research in aerospace, in quantum, in areas like clean propulsion? Do you think that the talent ecosystem is in place? What needs to be done?
Good, thank you. What I can say in this, engineers, if you say just earmark that engineers are there for innovation or maybe for other things, that is partially not correct. Because if you see there is a institute, National Innovation Foundation, and they are nurturing the grassroots innovators where there is no engineers. And they are such a people, those who don't go to the engineering level, but their innovations are really marvelous. They are the grassroots innovators. And sometime their student up to 6th to 10th class, they are doing a lot of innovation, and that innovation may be more fundamental and at useful level. But of course, engineers and then doing the research into that sector, they are, of course, we can say the torchbearer of the country to do some research that can advance the society and that can do for the humankind. But many of the places, and one time I have heard speaking our ISRO chairman, that engineers from top engineering colleges, I would not name the engineering colleges, top engineering colleges, they are not staying in the country for country development, and they are going abroad for maybe XYZ different reasons. And they are working with maybe the, whatever the criteria, they say first grade, second grade, third grade engineers, but the second line of the engineers, and they are doing wonders in, you can say ISRO and other places. So engineers are, of course, key persons to do the research, innovation, but scientists and other people, those who are not the degree holders of the engineers, they are also doing a lot of R&D. In research, I have had in some of the evaluation of NIF project, and those projects are really eye-opener for many people, that how the, that in beginning we say that this avashyakta aviskar ki journey, something like that. So how the kids are finding different products and they are going to the product level. They are making the products. So that we have to very, means open our eyes in each and every field. What are the necessary things and which we have to innovate for our country development? Thank you.
A very interesting, I think, issue you've raised, which is need-based innovation and the role of grassroots innovation. Let me just pivot back to, before I come back with the following question to Professor Krishnan. Professor Krishnan, your reflection on what Dr. Pandey has just raised.
Yeah, so I just want to go back to a little bit again to look at how engineering education in India has evolved over time. So if you look at it historically, engineering education in India was not as practice-oriented as it should be. I think that's something most of us would agree on. A lot of it was really much more theoretical. It was much more focused, maybe at best on simulation. But the number of actual products and so on which people used to make in the engineering curriculum were very minimal. One good thing that's happened over time is now there's an increasing emphasis on translating the theoretical knowledge of the classroom into something more practical. It's starting right from the school level with the Atal Tinkering Labs and the whole need for making the school curriculum more application oriented. But even in engineering colleges now, there is an understanding that you need to encourage startups, you need to encourage more practical projects, You find students in many colleges actually trying to make even things like rockets and racing cars and many other things which were not even thought possible maybe even a decade ago. So I believe all of that is a good trend towards getting our engineers more into the world of practice. The other side of it is actually on the demand side. Now, Dr. Pandey was mentioning how traditionally many of our best engineers went abroad. While of course you could blame them, the fact is that in many engineering domains, the most challenging practical problems were not in India. They were elsewhere in the world. And our students, being very talented individuals, went and sought to do those problems, to address those problems. But if you look at the last few years, you look at the last decade, even from IITs, the number of students who are going abroad directly has come down significantly. One of the reasons is, of course, is the growth of the startup ecosystem. Another reason is the availability of good jobs that people like Alok and others provide in the global capability centers. So there is a much stronger demand now for high quality engineering talent. Maybe some of it is more IT oriented, but that by itself is not a bad thing. But overall, if you look at the GCCs, they are providing that opportunity. So my general trend is to think that, one should really look at how can we create local demand for high quality engineers and scientists. And then we'll also find more of our students actually gravitating towards those jobs, which again goes back to the point I made right in the beginning, that you also need people investing in those emerging sectors so that there is an opportunity for the talent to actually take up those challenges and make them work.
Interesting, but on a lighter note, maybe we could, in a year's time, credit President Trump with being a great enabler of innovation in India, given that a lot of best students of India will be now in India, with the American universities potentially closed for them. But on a more serious note, let's come to the question of ethics, and in particular the significance and the importance of ethics in R&D, and in actually mainstreaming R&D is a bigger contributor of our economy.
Okay, so any type of research or anything which we are doing that needs ethics, that is a different level. And if you say that ethics, because of the ethics failure, we have 1984, that Bhopal gas tragedy. So this kind of thing, to avoid that, a strong ethical environment, strong ethical framework has to be there, and each and everybody have to follow the ethical framework. If you go on the basic research, many places we have either government institutions or private institutions, they are running this industry, academia, partnership, and doing lot of things. But there is a lot of pressure on faculty, in maybe in private institution or maybe government institutions also. And due to that, lot of research they are doing just for publishing, and that is not going to favor or help anyway in our growth of the country. Many of the paper is retracted, and that is also giving a very bad flavor to the research community, and in our, actually we can say, the Indian position in the global research market. That is, one study has said that in 2022, we are the third at the retracted list. So that is also very alarming, and that any institute, either it is private, government, or any sector, where it is there that you have to publish that much amount, or you have to publish what is called, go for that much patent, that should be stopped somehow. People should be given a free hand to do whatever the research they wanted to do, and that research topic should be for the use of humanity and use of the country, not for just publishing the paper. In paper publication or patent filing, if you go for the patent filing data, I don't think that more than 5-6% patent is going to be commercialized. So what is the use of those patents? Only filing and having the name that I have 10 or 20 patent. That is not good. So each and every place, that also ethics is very much required, that what kind of patent we are going to do. Is it going to just give a name to our profile that yes, I have 10 or 20 patent, or any one of them is going to apply, that is the commercialized for the use of humankind. So that is the most important thing, that is what kind of research selecting the research problem, ethics should be there. Doing the research, ethics should be there. Publication, we should not go on any pressure that this much paper or this much things we have to do. And we have to avoid that there should not be any restriction. I am at Indian National Science Academy. Each and every year, thousands of people are going for academy, that is the fellowship of the academy. And when this discussion goes on in the group, many people comes with this, that this much have, this much retracted paper, this many retracted paper. Even the people are very, very good scientists, but at his name, 10, 15 retraction is there, or some other ethical issues is there, and then different kind of discussion goes on. So it is highly required that we practice ethics at each and every level, either it is research or commercializing or at the patent level. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for flagging this extremely important aspect. It's not just about research, it's about the quality of the research, it's about the fate of the research. Coming, to the fate of the research question, and I'm just opening this up to both Professor and Alok. This whole thing about what happens to these patents, the whole gap between patents and application of patents and products. What do you think needs to be done? If there's one thing that can be done to close that gap, what would your recommendation be?
So the MIT definition of innovation, I really like. They define innovation as innovation is equal to invention multiplied by what was the value that invention created. Whether it was benefit of the society, or somebody made some money, or there was some new product which somebody used. So without the value, it's only invention, it's not innovation. So innovation, by definition, has to create value, and sometimes we forget that. So I think in most industries, filing a patent is an expensive business. You have to pay money to file, you also have to pay money to sustain, to maintain the patent. So in the industry at least, you would not pay money if that was just an invention and not really, it did not create value. So I think those are the standards we should deploy. If something is not really creating value, it's actually not innovation at all. Zero, anything multiplied by zero is zero.
So I think your question is actually a subset of a larger question. And that question is the need to have a sort of smooth flow across the entire innovation value chain. Historically in India, while we've had fair amount of research going on in academia, the proportion of that research which has actually got converted into processes, products, applications, and met Alok's value test is actually quite small. And one of our big challenges earlier and even today is to take that research and make it go across the pipeline, which also means that the kind of projects you take up should be projects which ultimately are likely to have some probability of commercialization. And that's where, just going back to some points I made in the early part of the discussion, some of the recent initiatives of the government are trying to take that into consideration in a more explicit way. So when you look at what ANRF is proposing, or you look at what the government is trying to invest through BIRAC and other programs, they are very clearly looking at investment in R&D which has some probability of ultimately getting commercialized. Not to say that basic science and research is not important, but that has its place. But given the number of challenges we have, the need to enhance the growth of the economy, the need to find jobs and many other things, we also have to have a much stronger focus on the kind of R&D which will ultimately lead to commercialization and to economic outcomes.
Thank you. And Professor, if I had to just sort of build on that and talk about bridging the gap between management innovation and technology innovation. Where do you say, where we are at the moment in respect of that correlation, and what can business schools like IIMs do to actually, bring that
value proposition together?
See, if you look at the history of innovation, it's not always the coolest technology that's been the most impactful. You look at something very simple like the assembly line. The assembly line is now a concept more than 100 years old, but the assembly line revolutionized the manufacture of cars. It's the assembly line which actually enabled the car to be produced as a standardized product at an affordable cost. So now you can argue whether the assembly line was a management innovation or a technology or product innovation, but it had components of both. It was essentially looking at how can you manage the production process in a better way so that you can create an affordable standard product. So if you look at the history of innovation, there are many innovations like that which have had efficiency in mind and which have had a significant management component involved. Take another very simple innovation. You look at the innovation of the standardized container, which goes into ships or is carried on a truck. The container, which otherwise is a very simple concept, completely revolutionized global trade because it made it easier to use ships efficiently, it enabled you to use transportation trailers more efficiently, and that standardization just improved logistics across the board. Of course, there's a technical component to it, but in a way it was a management thinking which said, how do we make this whole transportation much easier and more efficient to do? So I think the crux of the whole thing is getting managers also to think how to use technology in a more efficient way, because efficiency is certainly one of the most important outcomes of a lot of innovation that happened. Even if you look at AI, for all the marvels of Gen AI, today, if you just look up what has been the effect of AI so far, the most productive outcomes of AI have actually been in efficiency improvement. So that's really what has driven a lot of what happens in industry. And efficiency improvement normally translates into economic returns much more easily. So that's one of the reasons it's also a driver. So just to close that, I would say that management students also need to integrate this idea better. And one of the things we are realizing in business schools is that given the extent to which technology is transforming industry, today's MBA graduate needs to have a much better understanding of technology than he or she needed to have earlier. So we are also revising our curriculum to make sure that all the current technological developments and their integration in business is a much more significant part of our curriculum so that the students can actually play a role in this when they go into industry.
I think, Masood, there is, in addition to the management talent, I think the engineering talent also has to keep up with this. I'll give you one story which has stayed with me. You know, 2 decades back when we were building our team, we realized that we had a lot of people who could do very well good finite element analysis, anything to do with computers or software but there were very few people who were very good at design. And we were not able to understand that till somebody pointed out that actually in our society, we don't do anything ourselves. Like if we have to, something happens in our sink, we call a plumber. If we have to change a bulb, we call an electrician. If we have to change the tire of our car, we wait for the mechanic to come. We don't really do anything ourselves. If you see some of the other societies, anybody's home you go, they may not have a place to sleep, but they will have a toolbox. Okay, we don't have that. So what I remember we did was that we bought 5 bicycles and we had teams come in and disassemble and assemble the bicycle. That's it. As simple a job as that, and we did not give them any tools. They had to buy their tools. We had some money that to give. It's the simplest of the products. Then of course later on we moved on, we bought a helicopter engine and we did the same thing on the helicopter engine. But we realized that our engineering colleges churn out a lot of engineers who actually know very little of engineering, okay, which is practical. So I think we have to instill that thought process of basic fundamental learning and not only doing stuff that can get us a job, which is also important, but I think that learning is also important.
We hear you. That's a great example, actually. So let me just, mindful of time, I've just been reminded that, our chats can go into the next hour as well, but we're running out of time. So one last question, this is open to everyone here, and this is your magic bullet question. If wishes were horses, if you had one magic bullet, and with that you could get any intervention, one intervention, and I'll take you back to the innovation that drove our success and our management response of COVID. That mission mode innovation that we were able to do, if there was one magic bullet that you think can help us replicate both the speed and the scale of innovation in India, in a non-crisis context, what is that one magic bullet? Alok, let's start with you.
Trust the industry with taxpayer money for innovation. Don't hesitate.
So build better coordination mechanisms. The whole reason we were successful in COVID because we brought everybody together. Companies can also innovate if they can identify and understand the needs early. So build better coordination mechanisms.
In one sentence I can say, leadership is in R&D is not just about the breakthrough, but it should be breakthrough is the responsibility. That is, the responsible breakthrough should be there. That will be the, I can say.
I think one word that is quite relevant is assimilation. We must be able to assimilate our thoughts and actions across the entire segment, entire ecosystem, so that we could converge our thought processes and come out with something beautiful out of it.
Excellent, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, what a discussion this has been. I've got something like 10 pages of written notes. This is more work than I've done in a very long time, I'm being very honest. And now I have to summarize all of this in the next 5 minutes. Forgive me, any omissions are my fault alone, but I will try and be true to what I heard from all of you. What we heard today from Professor Krishnan, I think real thought leadership. An interesting concept that R&D spend actually is historically followed what our economy was, and those sectors of economy were not very research intensive, and therefore why should we beat ourselves up? As we move into deep tech, as we move into emerging tech, naturally our research spending will grow and must grow. We have the talent. The ecosystem is now coming into place. Still a work in progress, but it's coming into place. The question that he asks all of us, India Inc., and that's what's in this room, do we have companies that truly aspire leadership? I'm pausing and asking that same question once again. Do we have companies that truly aspire leadership? Yes, I think we are seeing in defense and in space, we see that critical mass emerging. But we need to replicate that in other areas of focus. And I think the gap between research and results on the ground at scale is being addressed through programs such as IDEX and Quantum Mission. Examples from ANRF and BIRAC that we must choose more projects that are based on the use case, based on what problems they are solving, as opposed to just fundamental research alone. And the fact that management innovation is equally important, is actually key to realizing the value of technology innovations. Let's bring everything and everyone together, was his closing statement. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big hand to Professor Krishnan. Alok, thank you. Thank you for reminding us that India is now a different country. And the UPI case study is such a fantastic case study. When we get to it, we deliver, and we deliver like nobody has. And therefore, we should not be too harsh on ourselves. It took everyone decades to build aircraft engines, and billions of dollars. And we need sometimes to have that patience and the perseverance, the ability to invest. in order to get to that result. But it is not enough to just innovate on services, which is what India has done and done at scale and so fantastically over the past couple of decades. We must develop world-beating products. And I think his entire message today was trust the industry, give it money, and let it deliver the results. Innovation is invention multiplied the value that it creates, and therefore have tremendous focus on the value associated with every invention. I think developing some kind of a private sector focused IRR type approach onto every research project might actually be a useful framework. Thank you, Alok. Thank you for reminding us that the gap between patents and products can be covered by Indian industry today. Thank you. I'll go on and try and summarize what we heard from Prasanta. I think a very interesting take, the importance of R&D in respect of India's energy security, and the fact that the scope, the need, and the opportunity is all there. But it's extremely important to converge for all elements of the innovation ecosystem to come together, from skill development to application. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your ideas with us. And finally, just summarizing what I heard from Dr. Pandey, I think he reminded us of our tradition, our core value of Jugaad, the grassroots innovation, and the importance that has need-based innovation, and the importance of not forgetting that, not just in research labs, but also in our engineering colleges. The fact that when we focus on application, even the so-called second-line engineers can create world-beating organizations like ISRO. Today, if you look at ISRO, has one of the lowest cost launch platforms in the world, and one of the highest reliability launch platforms in the world. And it's not been developed by MIT graduates. It is actually developed by the so-called second-line engineers from the hinterlands of India. He also reminded us on the importance of ethics and the quality of research. Research not for the just sake of publishing, research not just for the sake of patent filing, but extremely important that we focus on the ethics of research and ensure that the research that we do, even if it is less in terms of number of papers published, number of patents filed, is real fundamental application-based research. Thank you, sir, for sharing those ideas with all of us. We have run out of time, but we have time for just one question. So one question, if anyone has, to this panel. If you have one question to the panel, please raise your hand, and please let us know who would like to direct the question to. Yes, sir, please.
So I'm Rajiv. I'm reflecting on the question that you put to the panelists in terms of that one word that would like to say. Reducing the cost of failure. How would the panel respond to that? I come from the space sector. I am the Deputy Director General for the Space Industry Association. So that's the question that comes foremost to my mind. Thank you.
Very good one. Professor, when I don't know who to ask, I look to you.
No, I think in a way that's already happening, but partly because societally now we are a little more open to the idea, for example, that somebody can get into a startup, fail, maybe go on to something else. We've had big failures in India and we seem to have taken them in our stride. I think while as a challenge, tolerance of failure is important, I think we also have to encourage more experimentation. I would say even before failure, the whole issue comes up with experimentation. For that, we also have to provide facilities, resources, what Alok was talking about, the willingness to trust other people to try things out I think the more that happens, we will also have, a greater tolerance for failure. Partly it's also, I must say, it's a societal issue. We also, for example, as parents, as elders, we also have to encourage our kids to take more risks, to do more things. It's happening in some way. I can see already my contemporaries, many of them seem to be much more willing to let their kids go on their own path. But I think we need to do much more of that so that we can really get everybody ready to take those kind of risks.
So I'll just add one last comment on this. I come from the environmental sector myself, made more mistakes and lost more money in that space, at least compared to anybody else in this country at least. And my takeaway was that as long as I fail relatively fast, which means not take 5 years to fail, and relatively cheap, which means not spend 500 crores and then fail, which in my space is a lot of money, I think the world around you increasingly now celebrates those failures. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for this amazing conversation.
Thank you so much for this very interesting session. May I please request everybody to step forward for a group photograph. I'd like to request Mr. Masood Malik to please offer a token of appreciation to the panelists. I'd like to request Mr. Alok Nanda to please give the gift to the moderator, Mr. Malik. Yes. Okay. With this, we come to the end of our sessions over here. I request all the delegates to please move to the Taj Palace. We have a special plenary over there, India at 2047, Accelerating Growth Through Trade, Resilience, Innovation and Inclusion, where the chief guest is